He was about to take the first bite, fork in hand, trusting the woman he had vowed to love until death. But then a scream tore through the mansion. A poor maid, trembling and terrified, threw herself across the dining room shouting words that would shatter everything. "Sir, don't eat that." What could a poor maid possibly know that would stop a billionaire cold? What truth could she unveil in one scream that would destroy a mansion built on lies? Stay with me, because what happens next is not just a story. It's a revelation about trust, betrayal, and the courage it takes to speak truth to power. To the outside world, it was a perfect life. A self-made billionaire with everything a man could want. Power, influence, a mansion on the hill overlooking the city, and a wife who turned heads at every charity gala. But perfection, as you'll soon discover, is often built on secrets. And sometimes the smallest voice carries the loudest truth. Who was this maid, and why was she really there? Why was the billionaire's wife always disappearing into private phone calls and locked rooms? And what was in that plate that nearly ended one man's empire and uncovered a betrayal so cold it twisted love into poison? These are the questions we're going to answer today. Her name was Ada Mitchell, 24 years old. A village girl from rural Pennsylvania who lost her mother to cancer when she was just 16. Her father, unable to cope with the grief and the medical bills, disappeared one winter night. He left Ada with nothing but a note that said, "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." She bounced between relatives who saw her as a burden, worked 3 jobs to finish high school, and eventually made her way to Philadelphia with $200 and a duffel bag. But Ada held on to one thing through it all: honesty. No matter how much it cost her. No matter how many times it left her broke or alone. In a world that often rewards cruelty and deception, Ada only knew kindness. And that quality, that stubborn integrity, is what brought her to the Cole mansion on that fateful autumn evening. Ada worked at a small diner on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee at 3 in the morning and the grease never quite left the air. She washed dishes in the back, scrubbed floors until her knees ached, and took home barely enough to pay for her tiny studio apartment. One evening, she stayed late because someone had to clean up after a large party. She was in the back alley, dumping trash into the dumpster, when a black car pulled up. A man in an expensive suit stepped out. He was older, maybe in his early 50s, with graying hair and tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 decisions. That man was Edwin Cole. Edwin Cole had a story that business magazines loved to tell. The boy who sold bottled water at traffic lights in Atlanta. The teenager who worked construction during the day and studied accounting at night. The young man who borrowed $5,000 from a retired teacher and turned it into a real estate empire worth $800 million. By the time he was 52, Edwin owned commercial properties in 12 states, employed over 4,000 people, and had his face on the cover of Forbes. But all that success came with a price. Loneliness. His first marriage ended in divorce. He barely saw his grown children who lived on the West Coast. And then he met Vanessa Hart at a fundraising dinner, and he thought he'd found the missing piece. Vanessa was 36, beautiful in that polished, calculated way. She knew exactly what to say, exactly how to laugh, exactly when to touch his arm to make him feel seen. They married within 8 months. Edwin thought he'd finally found happiness. But happiness, real happiness, doesn't perform. It simply is. And Vanessa was always performing. Edwin didn't see it because he didn't want to. Sometimes we choose blindness because the truth is too painful. But back to that alley, back to the moment Edwin met Ada. He'd just left a frustrating business dinner. He was exhausted, and his driver had stopped at the diner for coffee. Edwin stepped out to clear his head, and that's when he saw her. Ada was lifting a trash bag twice her size, her worn sneakers slipping on the wet pavement. She didn't see him. She was humming something soft, maybe a hymn her mother used to sing. Edwin watched as she helped an elderly homeless man who'd been digging through the dumpster. She gave him a container of leftover food from the diner and a bottle of water. She didn't lecture him. Didn't make a show of it. She just gave, smiled, and went back to work. Edwin felt something shift in his chest. He approached her and asked if she was happy working there. Ada looked startled, unsure why a man in a suit worth more than her yearly salary was talking to her. She answered honestly, "I'm grateful for any work, sir. Not happy or unhappy. Just grateful." That answer stayed with Edwin. The next day he called the diner and asked to speak with Ada. He offered her a job as a housekeeper at his estate. The pay was 4 times what she made at the diner, plus room and board in the staff quarters. Ada thought it was a prank at first, but when she realized it was real, she cried. Not because of the money, though that mattered, but because someone saw her. Really saw her. She accepted. 2 weeks later, Ada moved into the Cole mansion. It was like stepping into a different world. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, rooms bigger than the entire diner where she used to work. But Ada didn't lose herself in it. She remained who she was. Polite, hardworking, invisible in the way good staff are supposed to be. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. At first, everything seemed normal. Ada cleaned, organized, helped the cook prepare meals, and kept to herself. Edwin was kind but distant, always buried in work. Vanessa, his wife, barely acknowledged Ada's existence except to give curt instructions. The study needs dusting. Don't touch any papers on the desk. Make sure the guest bathroom has fresh towels. I'm having friends over. That was the extent of their interaction. But Ada noticed things. Small things. The way Vanessa's phone would buzz at odd hours and she'd leave the room to answer. The way she'd return from shopping trips without any bags. The expensive perfume on her clothes that didn't match any bottle in her closet. Ada didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't her place to question her employers. But then things started to change. About 6 weeks after Ada started working there, she noticed a pattern. Every Thursday afternoon, Vanessa would dismiss the staff early. She'd say she wanted privacy, that she was having a spa day at home or doing yoga. Edwin was always traveling on Thursdays, checking on properties in other states. Ada, along with the cook and the gardener, would leave by 2 in the afternoon. But one Thursday, Ada forgot her phone charger in her room above the garage. She came back around 4, letting herself in quietly through the side entrance. That's when she heard voices. A man's voice she didn't recognize, coming from the upstairs sitting room. And Vanessa, laughing in a way Ada had never heard her laugh around Edwin. It was intimate. Familiar. Wrong. Ada froze. Her heart pounded. She didn't want to believe what her instincts were screaming. She grabbed her charger and left without making a sound. But the seed of suspicion had been planted. Over the next few weeks, Ada paid closer attention. She noticed a silver car parked 2 blocks away on Thursday afternoons. She saw Vanessa texting constantly, her face lit up in a way it never was when Edwin came home. And one evening, while cleaning the main bedroom, Ada found something that made her blood run cold. A burner phone tucked inside a designer purse in the back of Vanessa's closet. Ada didn't touch it, didn't open it, but she knew. She knew that whatever was happening in this house, it was more than an affair. It was something planned, something dangerous. The breaking point came on a cold November evening. Edwin had been away for 5 days at a conference in Chicago. He was due home that night. Vanessa seemed nervous, checking her watch constantly, snapping at the cook over minor things. She insisted on preparing Edwin's favorite meal herself, a homemade pasta dish with truffle oil and wild mushrooms. She sent the cook home early, saying she wanted to do something special for her husband. Ada found that odd. Vanessa never cooked. In 2 months, Ada had never seen her so much as boil water. But Vanessa was insistent. "I want tonight to be perfect," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ada stayed to help with other tasks, cleaning up the kitchen as Vanessa worked. That's when Ada saw it. Vanessa thought she was alone. Ada had stepped out to take the trash to the outside bins. When she came back in through the side door, she saw Vanessa standing over the pot of pasta. She pulled a small vial from her pocket, something dark and liquid. Ada's breath caught. Vanessa looked around, making sure she was alone, and then poured the contents into the pot. She stirred it carefully, her face calm, methodical. Ada pressed herself against the wall, hidden by the pantry door, her mind racing. What was that? Medicine? Some kind of supplement? But the secrecy, the way Vanessa's hands moved with such cold precision, told Ada everything she needed to know. This was not love. This was murder. Ada didn't know what to do. If she confronted Vanessa, would she be believed? She was just a maid. Vanessa was the wife, the woman who attended charity balls and had lawyers on speed dial. If she called the police, what would she say? That she saw someone pour something into a pot? They'd laugh at her. But if she did nothing, Edwin would eat that meal. And whatever Vanessa put in it, Ada knew in her bones it was meant to harm him. Maybe kill him. Ada felt the weight of the choice crushing her chest. Stay silent and keep her job, her safety, her invisible life. Or speak up and risk everything. But then she thought about Edwin. The man who gave her a chance when no one else did. The man who saw her in that alley and didn't look away. Edwin arrived home at 8. Ada heard his car pull up, heard his footsteps in the foyer, heard Vanessa's sweet voice welcoming him. "Darling, you must be exhausted. I made your favorite. Come sit. Let me take care of you. Ada stood in the hallway outside the dining room, her hands shaking. She prayed she was wrong. Prayed that her suspicion was just paranoia. But then she peeked through the crack in the door and saw Edwin sitting at the head of the table. Vanessa placed the plate in front of him, that beautiful golden pasta glistening under the chandelier light. Edwin smiled, touched by the gesture. He picked up his fork, twirling the pasta, lifting it toward his mouth. And that's when Ada's body moved before her mind could stop it. She burst through the door, her voice raw and loud. Sir, don't eat that. The fork froze in midair. Edwin's eyes went wide. Vanessa spun around, her face a mask of shock and fury. What are you doing? Vanessa hissed. Have you lost your mind? Ada was breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. Please, Mr. Cole. Please don't eat it. Something's wrong. I saw her put something in it. The room went silent. Edwin slowly lowered his fork. His face was unreadable. Vanessa's shock morphed into outrage. How dare you? You're accusing me? I've been nothing but kind to you, and this is how you repay me? With lies. She turned to Edwin, her voice breaking. Edwin, she's been acting strange lately. I think the stress of the job is too much for her. We should let her go. But Edwin didn't move. He stared at the plate. Then at Vanessa. If there's nothing wrong with it, he said slowly, then you eat it. The room seemed to tilt. Vanessa's face went pale. What? Edwin pushed the plate toward her. Eat it. Prove her wrong. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. I'm not hungry. I made it for you. This is ridiculous. Edwin's jaw tightened. It. Vanessa's eyes darted to the door, to Ada, back to Edwin. And in that moment, her mask cracked. You're going to believe some trash she made over your own wife? The venom in her voice was unmistakable. Edwin stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Ada, go to my study. Call 911. Tell them we need police and a medical team. Now. Ada ran. Her hands shook so badly she could barely dial. She told the operator there was a potential poisoning, gave the address, and stayed on the line like they instructed. In the dining room, Vanessa's facade shattered completely. She screamed at Edwin, called him a fool, said he was throwing away their marriage over the word of a nobody. But Edwin didn't respond. He carefully covered the plate with a napkin and stepped away from the table. If I'm wrong, he said quietly, I'll apologize for the rest of my life. But if I'm right. He didn't finish the sentence. Vanessa realized then that it was over. Her plan, whatever it was, had failed. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but Edwin blocked her. You're not leaving. His voice was steel. The police arrived within 12 minutes. They took statements, secured the plate of pasta, and separated Edwin, Vanessa, and Ada into different rooms. Vanessa demanded her lawyer. Edwin sat in shock, his face gray. Ada answered every question truthfully, though her whole body trembled. The pasta was taken to a lab for analysis. It would take hours, maybe days, for results. But the detective on the scene, a sharp-eyed woman named Lieutenant Grace Parker, had seen enough domestic cases to smell the truth. She asked Vanessa direct questions. Where were you this afternoon? Who have you been in contact with? Do you have any other phones besides this one? Vanessa refused to answer without her attorney present. Lieutenant Parker then asked Ada to show her exactly what she saw. Ada led her to the kitchen, explained the timeline, pointed out where Vanessa had been standing. Parker's team dusted for prints, checked the trash. And there, in the bin beneath coffee grounds and vegetable peels, they found it. A small glass vial, empty, with residue still clinging to the inside. It was labeled with a chemical name Ada couldn't pronounce. Parker bagged it as evidence. She looked at Ada with something like respect. You might have just saved a life tonight. Ada didn't feel like a hero. She felt terrified. What had she just set in motion? Would Edwin hate her for destroying his marriage? Would Vanessa come after her? Would anyone actually believe her? The preliminary test came back 6 hours later, just after 2 in the morning. Edwin was still at the house, refusing to leave until he knew. The pasta contained a lethal dose of antifreeze mixed with a prescription sedative. Enough to kill a man Edwin's size within hours, making it look like a heart attack or stroke. The medical examiner explained that if Edwin had eaten even half that plate, he would have been dead by morning. The vial found in the trash matched the substances in the food. Edwin sat down hard when he heard the news. He didn't cry, didn't yell. He just stared at the floor, his entire world collapsing around him. The woman he loved, the woman he trusted, had tried to murder him. And a maid he barely knew had saved his life. Vanessa was arrested that night and charged with attempted murder. Her lawyer tried to spin it, claiming she was coerced, that she was scared, that it was a misunderstanding. But the evidence was damning. In the days that followed, more truths emerged. Vanessa had been having an affair for over a year with a man named Rick Dalton, a former business partner of Edwin's who'd been pushed out of a deal 5 years earlier. Rick had a record: fraud, embezzlement, and one prior charge of conspiracy that was dropped due to lack of evidence. Phone records showed hundreds of calls and texts between Vanessa and Rick. Financial investigators found that Vanessa had been slowly siphoning money from Edwin's accounts, small amounts he'd never notice, building a nest egg. But that wasn't enough. She wanted it all. The plan, as it unraveled in court months later, was cold and calculated. Vanessa had convinced Rick that if Edwin died, she'd inherit the majority of his estate. There was a will, one that Edwin had signed 2 years into their marriage, leaving 70% of his assets to Vanessa. She and Rick would take the money, disappear, start over somewhere warm and far away. But they needed Edwin dead, and it had to look natural. They researched, planned, waited for the right moment. That night was supposed to be it. Edwin, tired from travel, would eat the meal his loving wife prepared. He'd feel sick, go to bed, and never wake up. A tragedy. A widow's tears. A fortune transferred. Except Ada saw. And Ada spoke. During the investigation, Rick was also arrested. He tried to cut a deal, blaming Vanessa for everything, saying she manipulated him. Vanessa in turn claimed Rick forced her, that she was afraid for her life. But the evidence, the texts, the planning told a different story. They were both guilty. 2 people who valued money over human life. 2 people who saw Edwin not as a person but as an obstacle to wealth. The trial was publicized, sensational. The media called it the poison plot. Edwin's name was dragged through every news outlet. But through it all, Edwin remained quiet. He testified when required, his voice flat, his eyes empty. The man who built an empire seemed hollowed out. But there was one person who stayed by his side through every ugly revelation. Yeah, she didn't have to. Her job was done. She'd told the truth, and the truth had come out. She could have left, found work elsewhere, disappeared into anonymity. But she stayed. She kept the house running while Edwin dealt with lawyers and reporters. She made sure he ate even when he didn't want to. She sat with him on the nights when the silence was too heavy, not saying much, just being present. And slowly, over weeks and months, Edwin began to heal. Not fully, maybe never fully, but enough to breathe again. Enough to realize that betrayal, as deep as it cuts, doesn't have to be the end of the story. 8 months after Vanessa's arrest, the trial concluded. Vanessa was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Rick got 18. The judge, in her closing remarks, noted the callous disregard for human life and the premeditated cruelty of the crime. Edwin didn't attend the sentencing. He'd said everything he needed to say. He was done looking back. Instead, he focused on rebuilding. Not just his life, but his understanding of trust, of value, of what really matters. And central to that rebuilding was Ada. Edwin sat her down one afternoon in his study, the same room where she'd called 911 that terrible night. "I owe you my life," he said simply. Ada shook her head. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing, Mr. Cole. I just did what was right." Edwin smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen in months. "That's exactly why I want to offer you something." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a contract. Not for a maid, but for a position he'd created specifically for her. Director of Integrity and Ethics Oversight. Her job would be to ensure that within his company truth was valued. That whistleblowers were protected. That no voice, no matter how small, was ignored. The salary was more than Ada had ever dreamed of. She stared at the paper, then at Edwin, tears welling up. "I didn't do this for a reward," she whispered. "I know," Edwin said. "That's exactly why you're the right person for it." Ada accepted. Over the next year she transformed. Not in her character, that remained the same, but in her confidence, her education, her reach. Edwin paid for her to complete a degree in business ethics. She attended seminars, learned corporate governance, and became a voice within Cole Enterprises that people respected. Employees knew they could come to her if something felt wrong. And she listened. She created systems where honesty was rewarded, not punished. Where doing the right thing didn't cost you your career. The company culture began to shift. It wasn't immediate and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And it started because one woman refused to stay silent when silence would have been easier. Edwin and Ada never became romantic. Some stories don't need that ending. What they built was deeper than romance. It was respect. It was trust earned through fire. Edwin often introduced Ada as the woman who saved my life, and he meant it in every sense. She saved him from death, yes, but also from cynicism. From the belief that everyone could be bought, that loyalty was a transaction. Ada proved that integrity still existed, that some people choose truth even when it costs them everything. And in a world that often feels short on heroes, that mattered more than gold. Edwin restructured his will not to leave Ada money, though he set up a trust for her future, but to ensure his wealth would be used for good. Scholarships for kids like Ada. Foundations that supported whistleblowers and protected vulnerable workers. Years later, when journalists asked Edwin about that night, about how it felt to almost die at the hands of someone he loved, he always said the same thing. The worst betrayal taught me the most important lesson. That the people who deserve your trust aren't always the ones you expect. And that courage doesn't always look powerful. Sometimes it's a young woman with everything to lose, choosing to speak up anyway. Ada, for her part, stayed humble. She never wrote a book, never did the talk show circuit, though she was asked many times. She simply lived her life with the same quiet integrity that defined her from the beginning. She started a small nonprofit on the side, helping young women from situations like hers find work, find safety, find hope. Now let me ask you something. What would you have done in Ada's position? You're in a home that's not yours, employed by people who hold your livelihood in their hands. You see something that might be nothing or might be everything. Do you speak up, knowing you could lose your job, your reputation, maybe even your safety? Or do you stay quiet, tell yourself it's not your problem, that you must have misunderstood? It's easy to say we'd be brave when we're watching from a distance. But courage in the moment, real courage, is terrifying. Is your hands shaking, your heart pounding, your mind screaming at you to stay small, stay safe? And yet you speak. That's what Ada did. She didn't feel brave. She felt terrified. But she spoke anyway. And what about Edwin? Imagine loving someone, building a life with them, trusting them with your heart and your future. Then discovering it was all performance. That the person you held at night was planning your death. How do you recover from that? How do you ever trust again? Edwin could have become bitter. He could have isolated himself, decided that everyone was out to get him, that wealth made him a target and nothing more. But he didn't. He chose to let one act of genuine integrity remind him that goodness exists. That not everyone is corrupt. That trust, while risky, is still worth giving to the right people. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. This story, as extreme as it sounds, echoes real cases that have happened across the world. Spouses who plot murder for inheritance. Employees who risk everything to expose wrongdoing. The battle between greed and integrity is as old as humanity itself. What makes this story matter is not just the drama, but the choice at its center. Ada's choice. She could have convinced herself she was mistaken. She could have walked away. But she didn't. And that choice, that single moment of moral courage, changed everything. It saved a life. It exposed evil. It proved that one voice, even the smallest, can shatter a web of lies. Let me ask you another question. Do you think Vanessa ever truly loved Edwin? Or was it always about the money? Some people argue that she must have cared for him at some point, that something changed, that desperation or influence from Rick corrupted her. Others say no, that someone capable of such a cold plan was never capable of real love. The truth is probably complicated, as human truth usually is. Maybe Vanessa did feel something for Edwin at first. Maybe she liked the idea of him, the security, the status. But somewhere along the way, greed overtook everything else. She stopped seeing him as a person and started seeing him as an asset. And once that shift happens, once you dehumanize someone, even someone you share a bed with, terrible things become possible. Rick's role is equally chilling. He wasn't some stranger. He knew Edwin, worked with him, shook his hand. And yet he helped plan his murder. What? Money. Revenge for being pushed out of a business deal. Ego. The reasons sound almost trivial when weighed against a human life, but that's the reality of greed. It distorts perspective. It makes a pile of money seem worth more than a beating heart. And it finds partners. Vanessa and Rick fed off each other's worst impulses. Alone, maybe neither would have gone through with it. But together they became dangerous. That's something to remember. Evil often needs company. It needs validation, encouragement, someone else to say, yes, this is okay. We deserve this. In contrast, Ada had no one encouraging her. No partner whispering, you should speak up. I'll back you. She was alone in her decision. And that makes it even more remarkable. Moral courage, real moral courage, is often a lonely road. The crowd isn't cheering. Your friends aren't rallying around you. It's just you, your conscience, and a choice. Ada made the hard choice. And yes, it worked out for her in the end. Edwin rewarded her, protected her, elevated her. But she didn't know that would happen when she screamed, "Don't eat it." For all she knew, she was about to lose everything. That's the test of character. What do you do when doing right might cost you everything and no one is watching to applaud? Let's also talk about the role of intuition. Ada didn't have proof when she first felt something was wrong. She had observations. A phone call here. A strange laugh there. A car parked down the street. Individually, these things meant nothing. But together they formed a picture. Her gut told her something was off. And she listened. How often do we ignore our intuition because we can't prove it? How often do we talk ourselves out of what we feel because it seems paranoid or judgmental? Sometimes intuition is fear or bias, yes. But sometimes it's your subconscious picking up patterns your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Ada trusted that feeling enough to stay alert. And when she saw Vanessa pour that vial into the pasta, her intuition was confirmed. If she dismissed her gut earlier, she might not have been watching at that crucial moment. This also raises questions about the systems we trust. Edwin was a smart man, successful, strategic, and yet he was completely blindsided. Why? Because he trusted love. He wanted to believe Vanessa was genuine. And our systems, our legal and social structures, are built on trust. We trust that our partners aren't plotting against us. We trust that the food served to us isn't poisoned. Most of the time, that trust is warranted, but not always. And when it's violated, the damage is profound. It's not just the physical harm, though that's real. It's the psychological wound. The question that haunts you, how did I not see it? Edwin struggled with that. He replayed conversations looking for signs he missed. He tortured himself with what if. That's part of the betrayal trauma. The loss of your own sense of judgment. Ada helped him navigate that, interestingly. Not as a therapist, but as a living reminder that his judgment wasn't entirely broken. After all, he'd seen something in her that made him offer her a job. He'd trusted his instinct about her character, and he'd been right. That small truth helped him rebuild his confidence. Yes, he'd been wrong about Vanessa. Catastrophically wrong. But he'd been right about Ada. And if he could be right once, he could learn to trust his judgment again, more carefully, more wisely, but not abandoning it entirely. That's the balance betrayal survivors have to find. Not closing off completely, but not being naive either. It's a hard road, and Edwin walked it with as much grace as anyone could. Now think about the cook, the gardener, the other staff who worked in that house. They had no idea how close they came to being witnesses to a murder. Or worse, being implicated in it. If Edwin had died, police would have investigated everyone who had access to his food. The cook, who left early that day, might have been a suspect. Ada herself might have been questioned intensely. Vanessa's plan put innocent people at risk without a second thought. That's another layer of her cruelty. She wasn't just willing to kill Edwin. She was willing to let others take the fall if needed. Sociopathy, narcissism, whatever label you want to put on it, the core is the same. A complete lack of empathy. Other people are tools or obstacles, nothing more. The legal aftermath was complex. Edwin had to file for divorce while Vanessa was in jail. Their assets had to be divided, though given the circumstances, Edwin's lawyers argued successfully that Vanessa had no claim to anything. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed, which she tried to have overturned through forged documents, stood up in court. Edwin kept his empire. Vanessa left with nothing but a prison sentence. Some said that was justice. Others argued she should have faced attempted murder charges that carried life without parole. The debate about appropriate punishment for crimes like this is ongoing. What's the right consequence for trying to kill someone for money? Is 22 years enough? Too much? Justice is a human construct and it's imperfect. But it's what we have. Rick's family claimed he was led astray, that Vanessa manipulated him. Vanessa's family claimed the opposite. Both families were devastated, insisting their loved one wasn't capable of this. And maybe, in some other context, they weren't. That's the uncomfortable truth about crime. Most people who do terrible things aren't monsters every moment of their lives. They're humans who made monstrous choices. They have family who loved them, friends who thought they were good people. Evil isn't always obvious. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it wears a beautiful face and a charming smile. Sometimes it sits across from you at dinner and asks about your day. And that's terrifying, but it's real. Edwin's children from his first marriage reached out after the news broke. They'd been distant for years, wrapped up in their own lives on the West Coast. But almost losing their father shook them. They flew in, spent time with him, rebuilt bridges that had crumbled through neglect. Edwin told them about Ada, about what she did. His daughter, a lawyer in San Francisco, was astounded. "Dad, do you realize how rare that is? Most people would have looked the other way." Edwin nodded. "I know. That's why I'm making sure she's taken care of." His son, who worked in tech, was more cynical. "How do you know she's not playing a long game, saving you to get a bigger payout later?" Edwin looked at his son sadly. "Because I've seen who she is. And if you can't recognize integrity when it saves your life, you've already lost something important." That conversation stuck with Edwin's son. Over time he got to know Ada, saw how she handled her new role, how she treated people, how she lived. And he admitted he was wrong. He apologized to Ada directly. "I didn't trust you at first. I thought everyone had an angle. I'm sorry." Ada smiled kindly. "It's okay. After what your father went through, suspicion makes sense. Trust has to be earned." That grace, that understanding won her respect not just from Edwin, but from his whole family. She became, in a way, a part of their circle. Not by manipulation or design, but simply by being consistently decent. The nonprofit Ada started grew slowly but steadily. She called it the Speak Up Initiative. Its mission was to support people who witnessed wrongdoing and didn't know what to do. Whistleblowers in corporations, witnesses to abuse, anyone caught between silence and risk. They offered legal advice, financial support, counseling, and protection. Ada knew firsthand how terrifying it was to speak up. She wanted others to know they weren't alone. Edwin funded the initiative generously, but Ada also raised money independently. She wanted it to stand on its own, not be seen as just Edwin's charity. She spoke at events, sharing her story, encouraging others to choose courage. Her words were simple, never preachy. "I was scared. I almost didn't say anything. But I thought about what I could live with, and I couldn't live with staying silent." That phrase became a touchstone for many people. What can you live with? Not what's easy, not what's safe, but what allows you to sleep at night, to look at yourself in the mirror. Ada framed morality not as grand heroism, but as personal peace. And that resonated. People from all walks of life reached out to her. A nurse who reported a doctor's negligence. An accountant who exposed embezzlement. A teacher who called out abuse. Each had paid a price for speaking up. Some lost jobs. Some faced lawsuits. Some were ostracized. But none regretted it. Because they could live with it. They chose integrity over comfort. And Ada's story reminded them they made the right choice. As for Edwin, he eventually returned to work, but with a different perspective. He was less focused on expansion, more focused on impact. He sold off several properties and invested the money into affordable housing projects. He funded scholarships for first-generation college students. He partnered with Ada's initiative to create corporate ethics programs. He became, in his own words, less interested in building wealth and more interested in building worth. His employees noticed the change. Leadership became more transparent, more compassionate. Mistakes were treated as learning opportunities, not grounds for termination. The culture shifted from cutthroat to collaborative. Profits didn't suffer. In fact, they grew. Turns out, when people feel valued and safe, they work better. Who knew? Edwin never remarried. People asked, especially as years passed and he seemed healthier, more himself. But he always said the same thing. "I'm good. I have my work, my family, my purpose. I don't need a partner to complete me." Some suspected he was too scarred to try again. Maybe that was part of it. But those close to him saw something else. He'd found contentment. Not the flashy, Instagram-worthy kind. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need validation. He had breakfast with Ada once a week, a tradition that started in those dark months after the trial and never stopped. They talk about work, life, philosophy. Two people from completely different worlds who found mutual respect and friendship. Ada eventually met someone, a teacher named Marcus who volunteered at her nonprofit. He was kind, patient, and had no interest in her money or her proximity to Edwin. He loved her for who she was. They dated for 2 years before getting engaged. Edwin walked her down the aisle at her wedding. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family, held in a garden rather than a cathedral. Ada wore a simple dress. There were wildflowers instead of roses. It was perfect. During his toast, Edwin said, "Ada saved my life. But more than that, she reminded me what goodness looks like." I'm honored to call her family. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. So what's the takeaway from all of this? What's the lesson we're supposed to learn? Maybe it's that integrity matters. That doing the right thing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, defines who you are. Maybe it's that betrayal, as painful as it is, doesn't have to destroy you. that you can rebuild with help, with time, with purpose. Maybe it's that the people who seem powerless often hold the most power, the power to change everything with one act of courage. Or maybe the lesson is simpler. Pay attention to the people around you, to the small signs that something's wrong, to your own gut. And when you see something that could harm someone, speak. Even if your voice shakes, especially if your voice shakes. If you were in Edwin's position, trusting someone completely only to find out they wanted you dead, how would you move forward? Could you ever trust again? And if you were Ada, knowing that speaking up could cost you everything, would you do it? It's easy to say yes from the safety of distance. But in the moment, with real consequences, would you? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're the questions that define us. Because we all face versions of this. Maybe not literal poison, but betrayals. What? Moments where we have to choose between what's easy and what's right. And the choices we make in those moments echo far beyond ourselves. They shape families, communities, futures. Ada's choice saved one man's life directly. But indirectly it saved many more. The systems Edwin put in place because of her, the initiative she started, the culture shift in his company, all of that rippled outward. Employees who felt safe to report problems prevented accidents, fraud, harm. Whistleblowers who got support through her nonprofit exposed corruption that would have hurt countless people. One act of courage became 1,000 acts of protection. That's the power of doing right. You never know how far it will reach. You only know that staying silent guarantees it reaches nowhere. And Vanessa? Reports from the prison said she remained largely unrepentant, at least at first. She blamed Edwin for not being attentive enough. Blamed Rick for pushing her. Blamed the justice system for being unfair. Everyone but herself. That's often how it goes with people who commit harm. Accountability is the hardest step and some never take it. But a few years into her sentence, something shifted. Maybe it was therapy. Maybe it was the weight of time and isolation. She wrote Edwin a letter. He didn't open it for weeks. When he finally did, it was short. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything. But it's true. I'm sorry for what I tried to do. You didn't deserve it. Ada was braver than I ever was. Edwin didn't respond. But he didn't throw the letter away either. He kept it in a drawer, a reminder that people are complicated, that even the worst of us might find a sliver of remorse eventually. He didn't forgive her. But he stopped hating her. And that was enough for him. This story, this whole strange, painful, redemptive story, is a testament to the complexity of human nature. We're capable of great evil and great good, sometimes within the same family, the same room, the same moment. The difference comes down to choice. Vanessa chose greed. Rick chose revenge. Ada chose integrity. Edwin chose trust, then healing. Each choice led to consequences that rippled outward, touching lives in ways they couldn't fully predict. That's the weight and the beauty of free will. We choose. And our choices matter. They matter to us, to the people around us, to the future we're building whether we realize it or not. So here's my final question for you. What choice are you facing right now? Maybe it's small. Maybe it's huge. Maybe it's about speaking up, staying silent, trusting someone, walking away. Whatever it is, remember Ada. Remember that she was terrified and spoke anyway. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite fear. Remember that doing the right thing might not be rewarded immediately or ever, but it allows you to live with yourself. And in the end, that's the only person you can't escape. You have to face yourself every single day. Make sure that when you do, you see someone you respect. If this story moved you, if it made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's facing a hard choice. Someone who's doubting whether integrity still matters in a world that often rewards the opposite. And let us know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between what was safe and what was right? What did you do? We'd love to hear your story. Because every story of courage, no matter how small, reminds us that goodness isn't dead. It's just quiet. And sometimes it needs to roar. Just like Ada did when she screamed, "Don't eat it." 3 words that saved a life and changed everything. 3 words that proved one voice, one choice, one moment of courage can shatter a world of lies and let the truth finally breathe. Thank you for watching. Stay courageous. Stay kind. And never underestimate the power of speaking up.